What's truly supporting you right now? Family, friends, your savings, all important, yes, but there's something far more fundamental, something many of us discover too late. I'm glad you're here with us today. If you're watching this, you've likely noticed how the foundations we once relied upon aren't quite as solid as we imagined. Children move away, friends face their own challenges, and even well-planned finances can suddenly feel uncertain. The supports we counted on through decades of life may not be what actually sustains us now. But what if I told you that true stability at this stage comes not from what others provide, but from what you deliberately build? That after decades of supporting others, now is the time to construct something enduring for yourself? Today, we're exploring what genuinely sustains us after 60. Not the temporary comforts or passing pleasures, but the deep, meaningful structures that provide real stability when everything else shifts. By the end of our time together, you'll understand the essential cornerstones that can support you regardless of circumstances. And more importantly, you'll know exactly how to begin building them into your own life. Before we continue, share in the comments, what's one thing you wish your children understood about getting older? To illustrate all of this, I want to share a story that captures this perfectly. Just 15 minutes from where I live, there's a place called Oak Ridge Community Center. Every Tuesday morning, in a sun-dappled garden they've created together, a remarkable group of individuals meets to share their journey of discovering what genuinely sustains them. Let me take you there now. Can you see it? The raised garden. Beds bursting with vegetables and flowers, the comfortable seating arranged in a circle, the 5 people gathered there whose wisdom has changed not only their own lives, but the lives of everyone they touch. There's Mary, a 70-year-old retired teacher with silver hair and bright eyes that miss nothing. She started this senior circle 3 years ago when retirement left her feeling adrift. "I thought my identity was tied to my classroom," she often says. "I had to discover who I was beyond the roles I'd played for decades." Beside her sits Robert, 65, a former construction worker with weathered hands and a cautious smile. He joined the group reluctantly after a heart attack forced him to reimagine his life. "My doctor told me what I couldn't do anymore," he explains. "But here I discovered what I still could do, just differently." George is the eldest at 83, a widower whose practical wisdom comes from decades of adapting to life's challenges. With his neatly pressed shirt and quiet authority, he often reminds the group, it's not about having more, it's about needing less and using what you have wisely. Nancy, 68, is the newest member. She moved to be closer to her children, but found they remained too busy to visit regularly. Her journey from isolation to connection resonates with many. "I had to become the architect of my own community," she says, her voice gaining strength as she speaks. And finally there's William, 74, a retired physician whose understanding of the aging body and mind brings scientific insight to their discussions. With enthusiasm that defies stereotypes of aging, he insists, your brain wants to grow at any age, but you must give it the right environment. As they gather in their garden sanctuary, these 5 individuals aren't just passing time. They're actively constructing the foundation for their remaining decades. Through their stories and experiences, they've identified something profound, the essential cornerstones that provide genuine support in later life. "We started meeting because we all felt something was missing," Mary explains, as the group settles into their circle. "We had retirement funds and health insurance and family photos on our walls, but we discovered those weren't what truly held us up when challenges came. Today, they've invited us to join their circle. For the next hour, they'll share not just philosophical ideas, but practical, actionable strategies they've developed through trial and error. Approaches that have transformed their experience of aging from one of decline to one of unexpected growth. Are you ready to discover what truly supports a life of dignity, meaning, and independence after 60? Let's begin. Mary rises from her seat, gesturing to the thriving garden around them. Many of us arrive at this stage of life feeling as though we've been uprooted, she begins. The roles that defined us for decades, parent, professional, caregiver, provider, suddenly shift or fall away entirely. That's why our first cornerstone is so fundamental. We call it identity reinvention. The group nods in recognition as Mary continues. When I retired after 35 years of teaching, I thought I knew who I was. I was Mrs. Peterson, the fifth-grade teacher who brought history alive. My identity was tied to my classroom, my students, and the daily rhythms of school bells and lesson plans. Mary walks toward a flowering jasmine plant she tends personally. Then suddenly, I wasn't that person anymore. The school year started without me. New teachers took over my classroom. And I found myself wondering, if I'm not a teacher, who am I? She smiles, touching the delicate white blossoms. That question can terrify us, or it can liberate us. Identity reinvention means recognizing that you are not just the roles you've played. Those roles were expressions of something deeper within you. Your true identity has always been more expansive than your job title or family position. Robert interrupts with a gentle laugh. I remember when you first told me that. I didn't believe you. I was a builder. That's who I was for 40 years. My hands shaped concrete and wood. My back carried the weight of construction materials. When my heart attack took that away, I thought I'd lost myself. But you hadn't, Mary replies. Tell them what you discovered instead. Robert looks at his hands, still strong, but now engaged in different work. I discovered that what made me a good builder wasn't just physical strength. It was my ability to envision something before it existed, to solve problems creatively, to take satisfaction in creating something lasting. Those qualities didn't disappear when my health changed. They just needed new expression. Mary nods. That's the essence of identity reinvention. It's not about becoming someone new. It's about recognizing the deeper qualities that have always defined you and finding fresh ways to express them. She turns to address us directly. This cornerstone requires honest self-reflection. What qualities have expressed themselves throughout your life? Your persistence, your creativity, your analytical mind, your compassion for others. These qualities transcend specific roles and can find new expression at any age. George, the eldest of the group, leans forward. When my wife passed after 52 years of marriage, I had to confront this head-on. For half a century, I'd been a husband. That identity shaped every aspect of my daily life. How I spent my time, the decisions I made, even how I introduced myself to others. What did you discover about yourself, George? Mary asks gently. That beneath the role of husband was a man who valued loyalty, who found meaning in caring for another person, who took pride in creating a stable home. Those qualities didn't die with my wife. They're still fundamental to who I am. They just needed new channels. Nancy speaks up, her voice soft but clear. For me, it was becoming an empty nester and then divorced within the same year. I'd been Mark and Jody's mom and David's wife for so long that I literally couldn't remember who I was without those labels. I actually had to go back to journals I kept before I was married to remind myself of the woman I used to be. And who was she? Mary asks with a knowing smile. Nancy sits taller. She was curious. She loved learning new things. She wanted to travel and had a talent for bringing people together. I'd forgotten those aspects of myself because they'd been subsumed by my family roles. Rediscovering them felt like meeting an old friend. Mary gestures toward the community center building. Inside, on our bulletin board, we keep what we call our identity maps. These aren't who we were, or even just who we are now. They're expansive visions of who we might become. She explains the process. Start by listing the roles you've held, professional, familial, community roles. For each one, identify the underlying qualities or values that made you effective or brought you satisfaction in that role. These are your transferable attributes, the essence of your identity beyond specific circumstances. Then, Mary continues, explore how these core qualities could express themselves in your current life stage. The teacher becomes a mentor, the executive becomes a consultant or volunteer board member. The parent of young children becomes a grandparent, a youth program volunteer, or a foster parent to animals. William, who has been listening attentively, adds his perspective. From a neurological standpoint, this process is fascinating. Our brains physically adapt when we engage in identity reinvention. New neural pathways form as we develop fresh expressions of our core selves. This neuroplasticity doesn't diminish with age. In fact, these identity transitions can stimulate cognitive vitality. Mary smiles gratefully at William. Exactly. Identity. Reinvention isn't just philosophically satisfying, it's neurologically beneficial, and it provides stability when everything else changes. Jobs end, health fluctuates, relationships transform, but your authentic identity, the core of who you are, remains accessible and evolutive. She pauses, allowing her words to settle. The question isn't, who am I now that I'm no longer what I was? It's, who have I always been beneath the roles I've played, and how might those qualities find expression today? Robert stands now, inviting us to shift our attention as the group moves to a different part of the garden. While Mary helped us understand that our identities don't depend on maintaining the same roles, I had to learn a related but different lesson, he begins. Which brings us to our second cornerstone, physical adaptation. Robert rolls up his sleeve to reveal a surgical scar on his arm. After my heart attack, I fell into a common trap. I focused on everything I'd lost, my strength, my stamina, my confidence in my own body. I defined physical well-being as the absence of limitation. And by that definition, I was failing. He gestures toward the raised garden beds, built at different heights to accommodate different physical abilities. Our second cornerstone, physical adaptation, rejects that flawed definition. It's not about having a perfect body or maintaining the capabilities of your younger self. It's about developing a new relationship with your changing physical reality. George nods emphatically. That shift in perspective changes everything. Instead of seeing my aging body as a betrayal, I began to view it as a partner requiring different forms of care and offering different gifts. Exactly, Robert agrees. Physical adaptation begins with acceptance, not resignation. There's a crucial difference. Resignation says, my body is failing, so I might as well give up. Acceptance says, this is the body I have now. How can we work together to create the life I want? Nancy smiles. I remember when you first joined our group, Robert. You could barely walk from your car to the community center without stopping to catch your breath. But you weren't resigned to that reality. No, Robert acknowledges. I accepted it as my starting point, not my destiny. Physical adaptation is active, not passive. It means working creatively within your current limitations while gradually expanding your capabilities wherever possible. He demonstrates by moving to one of the raised garden beds, the tallest one. We built these at different heights because we each have different physical needs. I can't kneel or bend for long periods anymore, so I garden standing up. George prefers the mid-height beds that he can reach from his mobility scooter on bad days. Mary loves to kneel on the cushioned mats next to the ground-level beds. Before we continue, remember to like the video to help us continue creating content for you. Now back to where we were. William, the retired physician, joins the conversation. From a medical perspective, this approach is profoundly beneficial. Studies consistently show that physical capacity can improve at any age, but the improvement doesn't come from ignoring limitations or pushing through pain. It comes from intelligent adaptation. Tell them about your 3 adaptation principles, Robert, Mary encourages. Robert nods. First, modify, don't abandon. When a physical limitation prevents you from doing something you value, look for modifications before giving it up entirely. I couldn't handle a shovel for hours anymore, but I could use a lighter trowel for shorter periods. I couldn't lift heavy bags of soil, but I could drag them using a small wagon. He points to various tools hanging on a nearby shed, each modified with extended handles, ergonomic grips, or lighter materials. The goal isn't to do things exactly as you always have. It's to preserve the activities that bring you meaning and satisfaction, even if the form changes. The second principle, Robert continues, is progressive challenge. Your body responds to the demands you place on it at any age. 3 months ago, I could garden for 15 minutes before needing to rest. Today, I can work for an hour. Not because I pushed through pain, but because I consistently worked at the edge of my capacity, then rested, then returned. Nancy interjects. That principle helped me tremendously with my arthritis. I'd given up painting because holding a brush hurt my hands. But when I started again, just 5 minutes at first, with a modified brush grip, my stamina gradually improved. Now I paint for an hour several times a week. And the third principle, Robert says, is compensatory development. When one physical capacity diminishes, you can intentionally develop others to compensate. After my heart attack affected my stamina, I focused on improving my balance and flexibility instead. Those improvements actually made many daily tasks easier despite my reduced endurance. William nods appreciatively. That's neurologically sound. The brain can reorganize to enhance certain functions when others are compromised. We see this with blind individuals who develop extraordinary hearing, but the same principle applies to more common age-related changes. Robert takes a deep breath, looking around at the garden they've created together. The most important aspect of physical adaptation is shifting from fighting against your body to working with it. Your body isn't your enemy. It's not failing you. It's changing, and it needs your partnership, not your frustration. He demonstrates a modified gardening stance he's developed. Physical adaptation means asking different questions. Not why can't my body do what it used to do, but what can my body and I accomplish together today? Not how can I overcome this limitation, but how can I work within this reality to create a life of meaning? Mary adds thoughtfully, there's profound dignity in this approach. Rather than being diminished by physical changes, you develop wisdom about your own body. You become more attuned to its signals, more creative in your approaches, more appreciative of what remains possible. Robert concludes, when you embrace physical adaptation, you discover something surprising. Limitation often sparks creativity. Some of our most innovative solutions in this garden emerged because someone couldn't do things the conventional way. Necessity truly becomes the mother of invention. As the group moves to a shaded seating area, George takes center stage. Though the oldest member at 83, his eyes are sharp and his voice carries confidence born of experience. Our third cornerstone, he begins, is one many find uncomfortable to discuss, but it's essential: financial resilience. He adjusts his neatly pressed shirt. I grew up in the aftermath of the Depression. My parents taught me to be careful with money, but even with decades of prudent saving, I discovered something crucial. Financial resilience in later life isn't primarily about how much you've accumulated. It's about developing a fundamentally different relationship with resources. Nancy nods. That was a revelation for me. After my divorce, my financial picture changed dramatically. I was focused entirely on the numbers, which were admittedly concerning, until George helped me see beyond them. The conventional financial advice for seniors isn't wrong, but it's incomplete, George explains. Yes, you should understand your income sources, manage investments prudently, Consider downsizing, minimize debt, and plan for healthcare costs. That's all valuable. But financial resilience goes deeper. He leans forward, his expression earnest. It begins with a crucial shift in perspective. Throughout most of our lives, financial success meant expansion, higher income, more assets, greater consumption. Financial resilience after 60 often requires the opposite approach, strategic contraction. Mary interjects, "That sounds like deprivation when you put it that way, George." But it isn't. George responds with a smile. Strategic contraction means intentionally simplifying your material needs while maximizing genuine satisfaction. It's about discovering how little you truly require to live with dignity and meaning. He gestures to his simple but well-maintained clothes. "I own perhaps a quarter of the possessions I had 20 years ago. Each item remaining serves a purpose or brings genuine joy. This isn't deprivation, it's liberation. I've discovered that managing fewer possessions creates space for experiences that matter more." William adds, "There's research supporting this approach. Studies of happiness across cultures consistently show that beyond meeting basic needs, additional consumption provides diminishing returns on well-being. Simplicity often correlates with greater life satisfaction, particularly in later years." George nods appreciatively. Exactly. Financial resilience means asking different questions, not "how can I maintain my previous lifestyle?" but "what lifestyle will bring genuine fulfillment while requiring fewer resources?" Not "what can I afford to buy?" but "what can I afford to maintain, repair, store, and eventually dispose of?" He describes practical strategies. "I practice what I call conscious spending. Before any purchase, I consider not just its immediate cost, but its total cost of ownership, including maintenance, storage, and eventual replacement. I ask whether this expenditure aligns with my core values and current life priorities." Nancy shares her experience. "When I moved to be closer to my children, I intentionally chose a smaller home than I could technically afford. The reduced expenses give me freedom to say yes to opportunities that arise without financial stress, like the painting workshop I attended last month." Precisely, George affirms. Financial resilience creates optionality, the freedom to adapt to changing circumstances. This becomes increasingly valuable as we age and face more unknowns. He outlines another principle. "I've also embraced what I call resourceful sufficiency. This means developing the skills to meet needs creatively rather than defaulting to purchasing solutions. Our community garden exemplifies this. We grow significant portions of our own produce, reducing grocery expenses while providing higher quality food and meaningful activity." Robert chimes in. "The skills exchange we've developed is another example. I help with minor repairs for group members. William provides health guidance, Mary assists with technology questions, Nancy organizes social events, and George shares financial wisdom. We've created a microeconomy based on mutual support rather than monetary exchange." George nods. "Resourceful sufficiency doesn't mean never spending money. It means recognizing that many needs can be met through creativity, skill development, and community exchange, often with superior results to commercial alternatives." He addresses a common concern. Some worry that this approach means becoming a burden on others. But the opposite is true. By simplifying your needs and developing creative self-sufficiency, you actually reduce your dependence on external systems, whether commercial services or family support. William offers a medical perspective. There's another dimension to this. Financial stress directly impacts physical health, raising cortisol levels, increasing inflammation, disrupting sleep. By creating financial margin through simplification rather than striving for ever-increasing income, many find their health actually improves. George shifts to practical application. We each maintain what we call a resilience inventory, a simple document outlining our essential needs, the resources available to meet them, and multiple strategies for bridging any gaps. This isn't just about money. It includes skills, community connections, and creative adaptations. Mary adds, that inventory was invaluable when I faced unexpected medical expenses last year. Instead of panic, I could systematically review my options and make adjustments with confidence. Financial resilience doesn't eliminate all money worries, George acknowledges, but it transforms your relationship with resources. You move from anxiety about having enough to confidence in your ability to adapt to whatever circumstances arise. Nancy stands as the group transitions to another part of their garden. Though the newest member, her transformation is perhaps the most visible. Our fourth cornerstone, she begins with quiet confidence, addresses something many of us struggle with after 60, the changing landscape of our relationships. We call it connection architecture. She smiles warmly. When I moved here 3 years ago, I knew no one. My children were busy with their own lives. My friends were hundreds of miles away. I waited for connections to happen naturally, as they always had throughout my life, but nothing happened. I spent weeks barely speaking to anyone. Mary nods sympathetically. I remember when you first came to our community center. You could barely make eye contact. You were so isolated. That's because I was operating under a flawed assumption, Nancy explains. I believed meaningful connections should develop spontaneously, that reaching out intentionally was somehow artificial or desperate. Connection architecture begins with rejecting that misconception. She looks around at the group that has become her community. What I've learned is that after 60, meaningful relationships rarely just happen. The structures that once facilitated natural connection, workplaces, children's activities, religious communities, may no longer be central to your life. Connection architecture means deliberately creating new structures. William adds, there's substantial research on the health implications of this. Social isolation increases mortality risk, comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes daily. Conversely, strong social connections correlate with lower rates of chronic disease, cognitive decline, and depression. Nancy continues, but knowing connection is important doesn't make it happen. Connection architecture is active, not passive. It means becoming the deliberate designer of your social environment rather than waiting for community to find you. She describes her journey. I started small, joining this community garden group, even though I knew nothing about gardening. I volunteered at the library. I took a watercolor class. Each step was uncomfortable. Each required overcoming the voice. That said, you don't belong here or no one wants to know you, George interjects. I remember your first day here. You barely spoke, but you came back the next week and the next. Because I'd made a commitment to myself, Nancy explains. Connection architecture means showing up consistently, even when it's uncomfortable. Relationships don't form in a single interaction. They develop through repeated, meaningful contact over time. She outlines her approach. I developed what I call my connection spheres, concentric circles representing different types of relationships. The outer sphere includes casual acquaintances, people I greet by name at the community center or library. The middle sphere contains activity partners, those I garden with or take classes alongside. The inner sphere holds deeper friendships, people with whom I share more personal aspects of life. The key, she emphasizes, is nurturing relationships at all levels. Even those casual outer sphere connections contribute significantly to well-being. Greeting the same coffee shop barista each morning creates a small but meaningful sense of belonging. Robert nods. I've noticed you're intentional about remembering details about people. That's not just being nice. It's part of your approach, isn't it? Absolutely, Nancy confirms. Connection architecture includes developing specific practices that nurture relationships. I keep notes after meaningful conversations, remembering a grandchild's name, an upcoming medical appointment, a concern someone shared. This isn't manipulation. It's creating the conditions for genuine connection to deepen. She describes another practice. I've also learned to initiate rather than wait. I invite people for coffee, suggest a walk, organize small gatherings. This was terrifying at first. I feared rejection. But I've discovered that most people welcome these initiatives. Many are themselves longing for connection, but hesitant to reach out. Mary adds, "You've become quite the connector in our broader community. You're not just building your own relationships now. You're creating structures that help others connect too." Nancy smiles. "That's the most fulfilling aspect. The monthly potluck dinners I organize, the walking group I started, these aren't just for my benefit. They're architectural elements that support many people's need for connection." She addresses a common objection. Some resist this approach because it feels contrived compared to the seemingly effortless connections of youth. But that's a misperception. Even in our younger years, structures facilitated our relationships, schools, workplaces, children's activities. We just didn't notice the architecture because we didn't have to build it ourselves. Nancy's expression grows more serious. Connection architecture also means being realistic about family relationships. Many expect adult children to be their primary social connection. This creates unhealthy pressure on those relationships and leaves critical needs unmet when children have their own full lives. She shares her experience. "I moved here to be near my daughter and son-in-law, but I've built a community beyond that relationship. This actually makes our family time more enjoyable. I'm not approaching them with accumulated social hunger. We connect as people who choose each other's company, not out of mutual obligation." William offers a neurological perspective. Different types of relationships meet different neurochemical needs. Family bonds, activity partners, intellectual connections, emotional confidence. A diverse social portfolio optimizes brain health, just as a diverse investment portfolio optimizes financial health. Nancy concludes, "Connection architecture doesn't happen overnight. It develops gradually through consistent, intentional action. But the result is profound. A social environment that supports rather than depletes you, that expands rather than contracts with age, that provides genuine belonging rather than mere proximity to others." She looks around at the group that has become central to her life. "When I moved here 3 years ago, I couldn't have imagined this. I thought meaningful connection was behind me. Now I understand. It wasn't connection that was limited, just my approach to creating it." William steps forward next, his posture reflecting both his medical background and his enthusiasm for the topic he's about to address. "Our fifth cornerstone," he begins, "might be the one most misunderstood in our society. We call it cognitive preservation." He smiles warmly. "The prevailing narrative about the aging brain is predominantly negative. We hear about cognitive decline, memory loss, and diminished mental capacity. This narrative isn't just discouraging, it's profoundly incomplete." Mary nods in agreement. "When I turned 70, a well-meaning friend gave me a book of crossword puzzles to keep my mind sharp. The implication was clear. My cognitive abilities were inevitably deteriorating, and the best I could hope for was to slow the decline." "That's exactly the mindset we need to challenge," William responds. "The latest neuroscience tells a far more encouraging story. Your brain remains capable of growth, adaptation, and development throughout your entire life. Cognitive preservation isn't about desperately clinging to what you have. It's about actively cultivating what you might yet become." He explains the science in accessible terms. Your brain operates on a use it or lose it principle. Neural pathways that aren't engaged regularly may indeed weaken, but the remarkable truth is that new pathways continuously form when you challenge your mind in the right ways. This neuroplasticity doesn't disappear with age, it just requires more intentional activation. George interjects with a laugh. When William first told me this, I was skeptical. At 83, I assumed my mental capabilities were fixed and slowly diminishing. But I've experienced the opposite since joining this group. My thinking is clearer and more creative than it was 5 years ago. William nods appreciatively. George's experience reflects what research consistently shows. Cognitive capacity isn't determined primarily by age. It's determined by how you use your brain. Cognitive preservation means deliberately creating the conditions that stimulate neural growth, rather than passively accepting decline. He outlines the approach. First, understand that your brain thrives on novelty and challenge. Routine mental activities, like that daily crossword puzzle, may maintain existing neural pathways but don't optimally stimulate new growth. For that, you need to regularly push beyond your current capabilities. Nancy shares her experience. That was a revelation for me. I'd been doing the same word games for years, always at the same difficulty level. William encouraged me to try completely different mental challenges, learning to play chess, studying Italian, taking a mathematics course. The discomfort was significant, but so was the growth. What are your thoughts on this? Comment below so we can know what you think. Continuing, William continues, this principle of novelty applies to all aspects of mental stimulation. New environments, unfamiliar social situations, complex problems requiring creative solutions, these challenge your brain to form new neural connections. The momentary discomfort of mental stretching produces lasting cognitive benefits. He addresses a common concern. Many worry about memory specifically. Memory changes are real, but our response to them matters tremendously. Rather than anxiously monitoring every forgotten name or misplaced item, cognitive preservation means developing strategic approaches to information processing. He demonstrates by describing their group's memory practices. We don't try to remember everything. Instead, we focus on strengthening our recall of truly important information while developing systems for managing other details. These external memory systems, whether digital tools or simple notebooks, free cognitive resources for more complex thinking. Robert adds, that approach transformed my relationship with my changing memory. Instead of feeling diminished when I couldn't recall a specific fact, I recognized that I was actually making intelligent decisions about what information to store internally versus externally. William nods. Exactly. Cognitive preservation includes discernment about where to direct your mental energy. The goal isn't to think exactly as you did at 30, it's to think better in ways that matter now. He explains another principle. Your brain doesn't operate in isolation from your body. Physical exercise increases cerebral blood flow, stimulates the production of growth factors that support neural health, and reduces inflammation that can impair cognitive function. Mary points to the garden paths where they regularly walk while discussing ideas. Our cognitive exercises often incorporate physical movement. The combination is more effective than either alone. William continues, nutrition and sleep quality are equally crucial. Your brain requires specific nutrients to function optimally and depends on quality sleep for memory consolidation and toxin clearance. Cognitive preservation means treating these physical foundations as non-negotiable priorities. He addresses the group. But perhaps the most powerful cognitive stimulant is meaningful social engagement. Complex social interaction challenges your brain to process subtle cues, adapt to unpredictable responses, integrate multiple perspectives, and regulate your own reactions. These demands create precisely the type of mental challenge that stimulates neural growth. Nancy smiles. That explains why our group discussions leave me feeling mentally energized rather than depleted. The respectful disagreements, the exchange of perspectives, the collaborative problem-solving, these aren't just socially satisfying. They're cognitively regenerative. William nods. Research consistently shows that regular, meaningful social engagement correlates with better cognitive outcomes, including reduced risk of dementia. Your brain evolved in social contexts and continues to thrive in them regardless of age. He outlines their practical approach. Each week, we engage in what we call cognitive cross-training. Rather than focusing exclusively on one type of mental activity, we deliberately engage different cognitive domains: analytical thinking, creative expression, social cognition, physical learning, emotional processing. This comprehensive approach produces broader cognitive resilience. George describes his experience. Before joining this group, I believed certain mental capacities were permanently behind me. I wouldn't have attempted to learn a new language or musical instrument. Now I'm doing both, with appropriate expectations about the process, but without artificial limitations based on age. William emphasizes this point. Cognitive preservation requires releasing preconceptions about what's possible. Age-related stereotypes actually impair performance, a phenomenon called stereotype threat. When you expect decline, you often experience it. When you approach learning with confidence in your capacity for growth, your outcomes improve dramatically. He concludes, your brain doesn't want to diminish. It wants to develop, to continue forming new connections, processing new information, generating new insights. But it needs the right environment to do so. Cognitive preservation means deliberately creating that environment through novelty, challenge, physical support, social engagement, and positive expectations. Mary stands next, moving toward the entrance of the community center building. Our sixth cornerstone, she begins, addresses something so fundamental we often overlook. We call it environmental control. She invites the group inside, where the thoughtfully designed space reveals deliberate adaptations. Throughout most of our lives, we adapt to our environments. We design our surroundings for aesthetics or convention, then adjust our behavior to accommodate those choices. Environmental control reverses this relationship. It means intentionally designing your physical spaces to accommodate your changing needs and preferences. Robert nods in recognition. Before my heart attack, I lived in a 2-story home with the bedrooms upstairs and laundry in the basement. I never questioned this arrangement until climbing stairs became a daily challenge. Suddenly, my home's design was actively working against my independence. Exactly, Mary responds. Environmental control begins with this recognition. Your physical surroundings significantly impact your capacity for independent living. Rather than struggling against environments designed for different needs, you can deliberately modify those environments to support your current reality. She gestures around the community center. Notice the thoughtful adaptations throughout this space. The lighting is brighter but diffused to reduce glare. The furniture provides proper support while remaining aesthetically pleasing. The pathways between spaces are wide and unobstructed. These aren't concessions to limitation. They're intelligent design choices that enhance everyone's experience. Nancy shares her perspective. When I moved to my current home, I initially resisted making adaptations. I didn't want to create what felt like an old person's space. But Mary helped me see that environmental control isn't about surrendering to limitations. It's about creating surroundings that enhance freedom and functionality. Mary smiles. That's precisely the mindset shift required. Environmental control means asking different questions about your living spaces. Not, how should this look? But how should this function to support my well-being and independence? Not, what's the conventional arrangement? But what arrangement would make daily activities easier and more enjoyable? She outlines their approach. We start with a simple assessment process. For each area of your home, identify activities that have become more challenging. Consider which environmental factors contribute to that difficulty. Insufficient lighting, awkward heights, limited contrast, excessive reaching or bending. George interjects, "That assessment revealed surprising patterns for me. What limited my independence wasn't major obstacles, but cumulative small challenges. Cabinet handles that were difficult to grip, light switches placed just beyond comfortable. Reach thresholds that created minor but risky transitions between rooms." Mary nods. Those seemingly small details have outsized impact on daily functioning. Environmental control means addressing both obvious and subtle barriers to independence. Often, the most effective modifications are nearly invisible. Better lighting in work areas, lever handles instead of knobs, strategic placement of frequently used items. She guides the group through the community center kitchen. Notice how we've organized this space. The most frequently used items are stored between waist and shoulder height to minimize bending and reaching. Drawers and cabinets have pullouts to bring contents forward. Counter heights vary to accommodate both standing and seated work. William adds a medical perspective. These adaptations aren't merely convenient, they're preventative. Falls remain a leading cause of injury among older adults. Environmental modifications that reduce bending, reaching, climbing, and navigating obstacles significantly decrease this risk. Mary continues, environmental control extends beyond your home to all spaces you regularly occupy. Your vehicle, community settings, even travel accommodations can be evaluated and modified to better support your needs. This proactive approach preserves energy for meaningful activities rather than exhausting yourself in unnecessary struggles with your surroundings. Nancy describes her experience. When I travel now, I request specific room features, grab bars in bathrooms, accessible shower entry, adequate lighting. These aren't special accommodations, they're intelligent choices that enhance my experience and independence. Mary addresses a common concern. Many resist environmental modifications because they fear creating institutional-looking spaces. But thoughtful adaptations can actually enhance aesthetic appeal while improving function. Universal design principles benefit people of all ages and abilities while maintaining visual appeal. She points out examples throughout the community center. Beautiful lighting that also reduces glare, elegant furniture at optimal heights for rising and sitting, attractive color schemes that simultaneously provide visual contrast for depth. Perception. These design choices aren't compromises, they're improvements that benefit everyone who uses this space. Robert shares his perspective. When I first considered moving to single-level living, I worried about losing the character of my older two-story home. But I've discovered that thoughtful environmental design actually creates more distinctive, personalized spaces than conventional arrangements that ignore individual needs. Mary nods. Environmental control means recognizing that standard design often serves no one optimally. When you intentionally create surroundings aligned with your specific requirements, the result isn't just functional, it's deeply satisfying in ways conventional spaces rarely achieve. She outlines their practical process. Start with highest impact areas, places where you spend significant time or encounter the most challenges. Implement modifications progressively, beginning with changes that provide the greatest benefit relative to effort and expense. Evaluate results and adjust as needed. William adds, this approach also stimulates cognitive engagement, problem solving. Around environmental challenges activates creative thinking. The process itself provides mental benefits beyond the functional improvements. Mary concludes, environmental control fundamentally alters your relationship with physical spaces. Rather than passively adapting to environments designed without consideration for your needs, you become the active architect of surroundings that genuinely support the life you wish to live. As the group returns to their garden, George and Nancy move to center stage together, Our seventh cornerstone, George begins, addresses perhaps the most intimate aspect of aging well. We call it emotional sovereignty. Nancy continues, throughout our lives, most of us depend heavily on external sources for emotional regulation. We rely on others to lift our spirits when we're down, calm our anxieties, validate our worth, or provide purpose and meaning. Emotional sovereignty means developing greater self-sufficiency in managing your internal landscape. George nods. This isn't about isolation or detachment from others. It's about developing the capacity to navigate your emotional life with less dependence on specific people or circumstances. This sovereignty becomes increasingly valuable as external supports naturally shift with age. Nancy shares her experience. After my divorce, I realized how dependent I'd become on my husband for emotional stability. When conflict arose, I relied on him to initiate reconciliation. When decisions loomed, I looked to him for confidence. When sadness hit, I expected him to lift my mood. Without those external supports, I felt emotionally adrift. Many experience similar revelations, George adds. Children grow up and establish independent lives. Friends relocate or face their own challenges. Professional identity shifts with retirement. If your emotional well-being depends primarily on these external factors, these natural transitions can be devastating. Nancy continues, emotional sovereignty begins with honest assessment. What emotions do you typically outsource to others? In what circumstances do you feel emotionally destabilized without external support? These patterns reveal areas for developing greater self-sufficiency. George describes the approach. First, recognize that emotional self-regulation is a skill set that can be developed at any age. Your capacity for managing difficult emotions, generating positive states, and maintaining equilibrium despite circumstances isn't fixed. It's highly trainable. Nancy nods. The process begins with more conscious awareness of your emotional patterns. Many of us operate on emotional autopilot, reacting to triggers in habitual ways without recognizing the opportunity for different responses. Simple mindfulness practices help identify these patterns and create space for new choices. She demonstrates a technique they practice regularly. When strong emotions arise, we pause to name them specifically. This simple act, I'm feeling disappointed, rather than a vague, I'm upset, activates the prefrontal cortex, reducing the emotion's grip and creating space for reasoned response. William adds, neurologically, this makes perfect sense. Labeling emotions engages brain regions that can modulate emotional reactivity. It's a simple but powerful tool for developing greater emotional self-regulation. George continues, beyond recognizing emotions, emotional sovereignty means developing diverse strategies for working with different feeling states. For anxiety, we might use specific breathing techniques or cognitive reframing. For sadness, perhaps physical movement or creative expression. For irritability, environmental modification or strategic withdrawal. Nancy describes her journey. I created what I call my emotional toolkit, specific practices for different challenging states. When loneliness hits, I have particular connections I can initiate. When anxiety strikes, I have physical practices that reliably create calm. This isn't about suppressing emotions. It's about engaging with them skillfully rather than being overtaken. George adds, emotional sovereignty also means developing independent sources of positive emotional states. Many rely exclusively on others for experiences of joy, meaning, or peace. While shared positive emotions are wonderful, depending solely on others for these states creates vulnerability. Nancy nods. I've deliberately cultivated activities that reliably generate positive emotions, regardless of others' availability. Certain types of music that elevate my mood, specific natural settings that inspire awe, creative practices that produce flow, States. These aren't replacements for connection, but complementary sources of emotional nourishment. George addresses a common misconception. Some fear that emotional sovereignty means becoming cold or detached. The opposite is true. When you develop greater emotional self-sufficiency, you actually become capable of more authentic, less needy connections with others. You relate from fullness rather than desperation. Nancy agrees. My relationships have actually deepened since developing more emotional self-regulation. I no longer approach others with the unconscious demand that they manage my emotional states. This creates space for more genuine reciprocal connection. George continues, emotional sovereignty includes developing greater comfort with the full range of human emotions, including difficult ones. Many spend tremendous energy avoiding uncomfortable feelings, creating exhausting patterns of denial, distraction, or displacement. Learning to be present with difficult emotions without being overwhelmed by them conserves this energy for more meaningful purposes. Nancy shares her experience. I used to panic when sadness emerged, immediately calling friends, turning on distractions, or staying frantically busy. Now I can acknowledge sadness as a natural, temporary visitor without surrendering my entire day to it. This isn't resignation. It's recognition that fighting natural emotional rhythms creates more suffering than the emotions themselves. William adds a neurological perspective. Research consistently shows that attempting to suppress emotions actually intensifies them while consuming cognitive resources. Acceptance paired with skilled management produces better outcomes both emotionally and neurologically. George outlines another principle. Emotional sovereignty includes recalibrating expectations about what circumstances should produce which emotional states. Many suffer unnecessarily from the gap between expected and actual feelings. Learning to meet your emotional reality with acceptance rather than judgment reduces this secondary suffering. Nancy nods. That was transformative for me. I had rigid expectations about how I should feel at family gatherings, during holidays, or on anniversaries. When my actual emotions didn't match these expectations, I experienced not just the original feelings, but additional distress about having the wrong feelings. George continues, developing emotional sovereignty means recognizing your fundamental right to your actual emotional experience, whatever it may be. This doesn't mean acting on every feeling, but it does mean releasing the additional burden of self-judgment about your emotional reality. Nancy describes a practical approach. We practice what we call emotional forecasting. Before significant events, we consciously identify potential emotional responses, both hoped for and challenging. This preparation reduces surprise and judgment when complex or difficult feelings emerge. George concludes, as we age, external circumstances inevitably shift. People come and go, health fluctuates, roles change. Emotional sovereignty provides stability amidst these transitions. Not because you never experience difficult emotions, but because you trust your capacity to navigate them with wisdom rather than being capsized by their intensity. Robert now moves to a particularly vibrant section of the community garden, an area with young fruit trees just beginning to produce. Our eighth and final cornerstone, he begins, addresses perhaps the deepest human need. We call it legacy construction. He gestures toward the trees. These aren't just plants, they're living embodiments of this principle. We planted them 3 years ago, knowing we might not be here to see them fully mature. Yet that knowledge doesn't diminish our joy in tending them. It deepens it. Legacy construction means actively creating contributions that outlast your immediate experience. Mary joins him. The conventional view of legacy is passive, something that happens after you're gone, consisting of memories others hold or possessions you leave behind. Legacy construction takes a fundamentally different approach. It means deliberately creating lasting value while you're very much present to witness its beginning. Robert nods. This shift in perspective transforms how you engage with time. Rather than seeing your remaining years as a diminishing resource to be hoarded, you view them as opportunities for initiating contributions that extend beyond your direct experience. George adds, throughout most of our lives, we operate with relatively short time horizons, completing immediate tasks, meeting next month's objectives, perhaps planning for retirement. Legacy construction expands this temporal perspective. You consider decades-long impacts of today's actions, what you're initiating, rather than just what you're completing. Nancy shares her experience. This concept initially confused me. I thought legacy was about grand gestures, endowing buildings, writing books, creating foundations. It seemed irrelevant to my ordinary life. But our group helped me understand that meaningful legacies often emerge from simple, sustained commitments to adding value wherever you are. Robert continues, legacy construction begins with honest reflection. What qualities, values, or insights do you want to extend beyond your immediate influence? What problems deeply concern you? What accumulated wisdom might benefit others? These questions reveal the seeds of potential legacies unique to your life experience. He describes his own journey. After my heart attack, I thought primarily about what I could no longer accomplish. Legacy construction shifted my focus to what I could still initiate. I couldn't physically build structures anymore, but I could teach construction skills to young people struggling to find direction. That program now involves dozens of volunteer instructors and hundreds of students. William adds, neurologically, this approach provides substantial benefits. Planning and engaging in legacy activities activates brain regions associated with meaning, purpose, and positive emotion. The time horizon extension actually improves psychological well-being in measurable ways. Mary continues, legacy construction takes many forms. Some create physical legacies, like our community garden that provides food for local shelters. Others build knowledge legacies, documenting insights from their professional expertise or life experience. Still others develop relationship legacies, intentionally, mentoring younger generations. Nancy describes how she applies this concept. I've always had a talent for bringing people together. Now I use that gift more deliberately, creating sustainable community structures rather than just one-time gatherings. The monthly arts showcase I organized initially needed my constant attention. Now a team of younger coordinators manages it, with me providing occasional guidance. George adds, another dimension involves transmitting values rather than just information or skills. I regularly write letters to my grandchildren addressing life questions I won't be here to discuss in person. These aren't just sentimental messages, but thoughtful reflections on challenges I know they'll face. This legacy of values will speak long after I cannot. Robert emphasizes an important distinction. Legacy construction differs from mere busyness or distraction. It's not about filling time with random activity, but about aligning your efforts with values and insights you want to extend beyond your immediate reach. This alignment creates a sense of purpose that transcends achievement for its own sake. Mary nods. The satisfaction comes not from completing legacy projects, but from initiating meaningful contributions whose full flowering you may never witness. There's profound meaning in this participation in something larger than your individual experience. Robert gestures again to the young fruit trees. When we planted these, some questioned whether it was worth it, given our ages. But that perspective misunderstands legacy construction. The value isn't just in eventual harvests we might not see, it's in the act of commitment to future flourishing. That commitment enriches our present experience while extending our influence. Beyond it, Nancy adds, legacy construction also transforms how you view the inevitability of limitation. Rather than focusing on what you can no longer do, you assess what contributions remain possible regardless of circumstance. Even with significant health challenges, you can initiate legacies of relationship, wisdom, or values. William offers a medical perspective. Studies consistently show that engaging in purposeful activities with benefits beyond oneself correlates with better health outcomes and longevity. Legacy construction isn't just philosophically satisfying, it's physically beneficial. George shares a personal reflection. When my mobility became more limited, I initially focused on what I'd lost. Legacy construction redirected my attention to what remained fully within my capacity, particularly the sharing of hard-won wisdom from 8 decades of life experience. This shift wasn't just psychologically helpful, it was existentially transformative. Robert continues, legacy construction also involves strategic decisions about resource allocation, particularly time and energy. Rather than dispersing these limited resources across many activities, you deliberately concentrate them where they might generate the most meaningful long-term impact. Mary concludes, this cornerstone provides a profound answer to the question that haunts many in later life. Does my existence still matter? Legacy construction offers undeniable evidence that it does, not because of past accomplishments, but because of present choices to initiate value that extends beyond your immediate experience. Your continuation matters precisely because of what you are still beginning. As the sun begins to set over the Oak Ridge garden, casting long golden shadows across the raised beds and gathering area, the 5 friends come together in a circle once more. Their faces, marked by decades of experience, reflect something beyond mere acceptance of aging. A quiet confidence, a hard-won wisdom, a genuine peace. Mary looks around at the group she gathered 3 years ago and smiles. When we first started meeting, each of us was struggling in our own way. We were facing challenges we hadn't anticipated, even after decades of navigating life's complexities. Robert nods. I thought my heart attack was the end of my story. Instead, it became a turning point. These 8 cornerstones haven't just helped me survive after 60, they've helped me thrive in ways I never imagined possible. George, the eldest at 83, leans forward slightly. What we've shared today isn't theoretical. It's not something we read in books or heard from experts. It's what we've lived, what we continue to live each day. These cornerstones support us through our hardest moments and our greatest joys. Nancy, once so isolated, now looks comfortably at home among these friends. 3 years ago, I couldn't have envisioned this, not just this garden or this community, but this version of myself, more capable, more connected, more at peace than I've ever been, despite the very real challenges of this stage of life. William adds, the beauty of these cornerstones is their universality. Regardless of your specific circumstances, your health status, financial situation, family dynamics, these principles provide genuine stability. They're within everyone's reach. Mary turns toward us, her gaze direct and warm. We've shared our story not because our experience is unique, but because it isn't. The challenges we've faced are the same ones you're navigating, or soon will be. The questions that kept us awake at night are likely familiar to you. And most importantly, Robert adds, the transformation we've experienced is equally available to you, not despite your age, but because of it. These decades have given you wisdom, perspective, and resilience that younger people can only imagine. These are the very resources you'll draw upon to build your own cornerstones. Nancy smiles. We didn't create this garden in a day. We didn't develop these 8 cornerstones overnight. Each small action, each seed planted, each connection initiated, each environmental adaptation built upon the one before it. Your journey begins the same way, with a single step in a deliberate direction. George looks around at what they've created together. When I lost my wife after 52 years of marriage, I thought my most meaningful days were behind me. I was wrong. Some of my most important contributions were still ahead. They just took a different form than I'd anticipated. Please like the video if you're enjoying this. Continuing. William nods in agreement. That's perhaps the most valuable insight we can share. The measure of a meaningful life doesn't change with age. It's still about growth, contribution, connection, and purpose. The specific expressions may shift, but the essence remains constant. Mary addresses us one final time. So now we turn to you. Which cornerstone resonates most deeply with your current situation? Which one, if developed intentionally starting today, would provide the stability you most need? Is it identity reinvention, discovering who you are beyond the roles that have defined you, Robert asks? Or perhaps physical adaptation, learning to work with your changing body rather than fighting against it? Maybe it's financial resilience, George suggests. Developing a new relationship with resources that creates security regardless of circumstances. For many, it's connection architecture, Nancy adds gently. Building meaningful relationships in new ways after previous structures have shifted. Some find cognitive preservation most compelling, William notes, actively engaging their minds in ways that stimulate continued growth rather than accepting decline. Environmental control might be your starting point, Mary continues, designing your surroundings to support independence rather than hinder it. Or perhaps emotional sovereignty speaks to your situation, George offers, developing greater self-sufficiency in managing your internal landscape. For others, legacy construction provides the most meaningful foundation, Robert concludes, creating contributions that extend beyond your immediate experience. Mary's expression grows more serious. The question isn't which cornerstone is most important, they all matter. The question is, which one will you begin building today? What single step, however small, will you take before this day ends? As the group rises and begins gathering their gardening tools, she offers a final thought. Remember that these cornerstones aren't built through extraordinary efforts or dramatic changes. They develop through consistent, intentional choices made day after day. The quality of your life after 60, she says with quiet conviction, isn't determined primarily by circumstances beyond your control. It's shaped by what you deliberately construct within the circumstances you're given, and that construction can begin right now. The 5 friends walk together toward the community center as twilight deepens, their garden continuing to grow behind. In them, a living testament to what remains possible at any age when you build on the right foundation. What cornerstone will you begin building today? Your experience matters. Please leave a comment to share your story or ask me a question. Thanks for watching.